A homeowner discovered a neighbor secretly plugging her Tesla into his private solar grid. What followed spiraled into HOA outrage, power theft accusations, security camera scandals, and a showdown the whole neighborhood wouldn't forget. Let me start from the beginning. The first sign that something strange was happening on the property arrived on a warm Monday morning when the digital monitoring system showed an unexplained spike in energy usage. The solar grid had always been predictable, forming a clean, steady rhythm that the homeowner had come to rely on. But now a large surge showed itself in the system logs, one that did not match the pattern of normal household consumption. At first, the anomaly felt like a fluke, perhaps a malfunction in the monitoring software, something to be blamed on an update or a temporary cloud coverage. Still, the spike lingered in the back of the homeowner's mind. The neighborhood had always been known for a certain brand of curated calm, enforced by the HOA with the quiet intensity of a governing body that had far too much free time and far too little meaningful responsibility. Among its residents, one stood out more than the others. A woman with an inflated sense of authority and a particular fascination with monitoring everyone else's business. She had taken hold of the unofficial title of neighborhood enforcer, though no one had ever asked her to assume such a role. Her presence was felt long before she appeared in person, carried in the form of watchful glares, unnecessary reports, and complaints filed about the smallest deviations from HOA guidelines. It was only after a second spike appeared the next morning, larger, longer, and unmistakable, that the homeowner began to suspect something purposeful was taking place. The solar grid wasn't just being overworked, it was being tapped. The idea seemed absurd at first. Who would trespass onto another resident's property just to steal electrical power? But as the homeowner reviewed footage from the security camera overlooking the driveway, the absurdity quickly shifted into clarity. Under the dim light of early dawn, a figure moved with hurried purpose across the edge of the property line. The homeowner watched as the figure crossed the driveway, trailing a thick charging cable behind her as though dragging some unwieldy tail. Her movements were steady and unashamed, indicating this wasn't her first attempt. She approached the sleek electric vehicle parked in front of the house, plugged its charging port into a nearby exterior outlet, one connected directly to the solar grid, and retreated just as quickly into the shadows. Her posture, her pace, and her familiar stance revealed exactly who she was, the self-appointed guardian of the HOA rules, the very woman who loved to chastise others for the slightest misstep. The realization settled over the homeowner with an unsettling blend of disbelief and irritation. The neighbor, known for demanding compliance from everyone else, had quietly helped herself to power that didn't belong to her, and renewable power at that. The irony was almost as infuriating as the theft itself. Determined to confirm the pattern, the homeowner reviewed more footage. Each clip revealed the same routine: early morning, swift movement, cable dragging behind her, charging completed before most residents even left their beds. It was clear that this behavior had likely been going on long before the energy spikes were noticeable. The homeowner wondered how many times the car had been charged using the solar grid, how many kilowatt hours had been siphoned off, how much sunlight had been turned into fuel for someone else's vehicle. The homeowner felt a rising sense of violation. An invisible line had been crossed, not with noise, intrusion, or vandalism, but with calculated misuse of a resource that was both private and expensive to maintain. The thought of confronting her seemed inevitable, but the situation required more than a simple accusation. Evidence had been gathered, but the HOA's track record suggested that any complaint would become complicated, political, and potentially manipulated by the very woman committing the infraction. As the homeowner compiled the logs, screenshots, and video clips, the situation took on a new gravity. This wasn't just about electricity, it was about boundaries, respect, entitlement, and an HOA culture that had allowed certain individuals to believe rules were tools to be wielded against others, not obligations that applied equally to everyone. By the end of the day, the homeowner had decided on a plan. The evidence would be organized, the documentation would be thorough, and the next steps would be deliberate. But before action could be taken, there were more details to uncover. Why had she targeted this specific solar grid? How long had this been happening, and what would she do once she realized she had been caught? The answers would come soon enough, but not before the situation escalated far beyond simple power theft. The homeowner had no idea that the confrontation to come would ignite a wildfire of HOA conflict, neighborhood gossip, and unexpected retaliation. The next morning would reveal just how deep the problem ran and how determined the neighbor was to keep benefiting from someone else's sunlight. The following morning arrived with the kind of uneasy quiet that forms before a storm, that hushed moment in which every leaf, blade of grass, and pane of glass seems to hold its breath. The homeowner stepped outside, feeling the weight of the evidence compiled the night before. The security footage, the energy logs, the timestamps, the unmistakable figure connecting her vehicle to the solar outlet, all of it painted a clear picture. Now came the burdensome task of dealing with the HOA, an entity notorious for solving trivial problems with theatrical seriousness while mishandling genuine misconduct with a baffling inconsistency. The HOA office resided in the repurposed community center, a squat building with fading paint and a meticulously trimmed lawn, a facade of orderliness masking the disarray within. Submitting a report felt less like filing a complaint and more like entering a political arena. The board members, each convinced of their own significance, maintained a maze of procedures, forms, and subcommittees meant to create the illusion of structure. Yet for all their bureaucratic flair, the group had no real interest in fairness. The neighbor accused of stealing power was one of their favorites, a regular attendee at meetings, a volunteer for committees that no one else wanted to be part of, and a constant source of gossip that entertained them between agenda items. The homeowner turned in the report anyway, knowing full well that the HOA's responses were unpredictable. Sometimes they reacted swiftly, issuing fines for harmless mailbox decorations. Other times they ignored substantial concerns, especially if the issue involved someone within their inner social circle. Still, the footage and data were undeniable. Even the board, with all its biases, would struggle to dismiss such compelling evidence. For 2 days, the neighborhood remained tense. The homeowner noticed an unusual amount of foot traffic by the house. Residents strolling slower than usual, eyes drifting toward the driveway, whispering behind fences and hedges. Word spread quickly in communities like this, where secrets rarely stayed contained and scandal carried more weight than truth. The knowledge that something involving the HOA was brewing seemed to animate the neighborhood, pulling people into the unfolding situation even before any official response was given. When the HOA finally reached out, their tone was predictably rigid, cloaked in the language of formality. They requested a meeting, claiming a need to discuss concerns involving shared resources, property boundaries, and community expectations. The wording was vague, almost intentionally so, but the homeowner knew that the issue had struck a nerve. Whether they intended to address the misconduct or deflect blame entirely remains to be seen. The meeting took place in a cramped conference room within the community center, furnished with plastic chairs and a long table scarred by years of use. On one end sat the HOA board, 3 members who wore expressions of officious seriousness. On the other, the homeowner waited with a calm determination that belied a growing sense of apprehension. And in the corner, perched upright with crossed arms and a self-satisfied posture, sat the neighbor who had been stealing power, her presence making it abundantly clear that she had been informed of the complaint and intended to defend herself despite the overwhelming evidence. The board members sifted through the printed logs and screenshots with a mix of curiosity and discomfort. Though the evidence was irrefutable, their body language suggested reluctance. This was no simple matter of a misplaced lawn ornament or unapproved paint color. This involved one of their own, someone who had ingratiated herself with them over countless meetings. The realization that they might need to hold her accountable created an obvious tension, reflected in their hesitant glances and prolonged silence. The neighbor, meanwhile, radiated indignation, as though she was the victim rather than the perpetrator. Her expression conveyed an unwavering belief that her actions had been justified, that whatever she had done was permissible by virtue of her perceived authority in the community. That belief, rooted in entitlement, reinforced by years of unchallenged behavior, was now colliding with the hard evidence of her wrongdoing. After reviewing the materials, the board retreated into a whispered discussion, their hushed voices betraying uncertainty. When they finally addressed the homeowner, their words were carefully chosen, attempting to balance diplomacy with obligation. They acknowledged the misuse of the homeowner's solar grid, recognized the violation of property boundaries, and agreed that corrective action would be necessary. But their proposed solution proved disappointingly mild. Rather than issuing a substantial fine, requiring repayment for stolen energy, or imposing disciplinary measures, they opted for a warning. They insisted the neighbor cease charging her vehicle from the homeowner's outlet and promised to monitor the situation moving forward. It was a decision that reflected the board's reluctance to confront one of their favored members with meaningful consequences. The homeowner left the meeting with a mixture of frustration and clarity. The HOA, bound by its loyalties and social politics, would not protect him. The responsibility for defending his property fell squarely on his own shoulders. And as he approached his house, his instincts confirmed what his eyes quickly detected. The neighbor had already retaliated. A fresh, bright orange violation notice clung to the homeowner's door, an accusation of non-compliance regarding landscaping, clearly manufactured, clearly targeted, and clearly designed to assert dominance after being exposed. She had wasted no time using the HOA's complaint system as a weapon. This was no longer a simple case of stolen electricity. It was now a battle of boundaries, authority, and resilience. And the next phase would escalate the conflict in ways neither side could have anticipated.
The violation notice hung crookedly on the door for hours before the homeowner finally removed it, its bright color and bold lettering serving as a symbol of the shifting battle now unfolding in the neighborhood. It represented more than an accusation. It represented a warning from someone who believed herself untouchable, someone who had used the HOA's systems as tools for retaliation. The neighbor's attempt to regain control through petty enforcement only clarified what the homeowner already suspected. The situation would not be resolved through the HOA, nor would it simply fade with time. This conflict had entered a new phase. Over the next several days, the homeowner monitored the property with heightened vigilance. The security cameras became constant companions, their feeds checked regularly for suspicious activity, and the cameras did not disappoint. The neighbor, though warned officially, continued to hover near the property with an air of entitlement that bordered on defiance. She patrolled the edge of the driveway as though searching for an opportunity to reclaim the access she felt she deserved. Her Tesla remained parked across from the house each morning, its charging cable neatly coiled, a silent promise of further confrontation. The homeowner, recognizing the need to establish firmer boundaries, began documenting everything. Every visit, every trespass, every violation was captured and cataloged. The solar outlet was fitted with a lockable cover, the driveway perimeter marked more clearly, and additional lighting installed to illuminate any attempted intrusion. The changes created a subtle shift in the balance of power, not enough to deter the neighbor entirely, but enough to unsettle her presumptions of authority. The tension grew heavy in the neighborhood air, and soon the residents took notice. Quiet conversations drifted from driveway to driveway, clusters of neighbors formed with concerned expressions, and speculations swirled like leaves in a restless breeze. Though no one dared confront the neighbor directly, the shifting social undercurrents signaled that her behavior had finally crossed a line visible to more than just the homeowner. The once supportive HOA members avoided eye contact with her during walks, and even her closest allies seemed hesitant to engage. Her influence was beginning to waver. But the neighbor did not retreat. Instead, she escalated. One evening, the solar system's monitoring app alerted the homeowner to a sudden draw on the grid, one even larger than the previous spikes. The timestamp placed the event just after midnight. Racing to the window, the homeowner scanned the driveway only to find the charging port untouched. Confusion became dread when the homeowner reviewed the footage from the backyard camera. Under the cover of darkness, the neighbor had bypassed the locked outlet entirely. With surprising boldness, she had dragged a ladder from her property to the side of the house, climbed up to access an exterior junction box, and connected a makeshift adapter cable straight into the system's wiring. It was no longer a matter of simple theft. It was a reckless, dangerous act that jeopardized both properties. Her determination to siphon energy from the solar grid had shifted into an obsession, driven not by need, but by the refusal to accept a boundary she had been told she could not cross. The homeowner felt a deep, cold resolve settle in. This could no longer be handled through warnings, documentation, or HOA channels. The neighbor's actions constituted a serious violation, one that risked electrical fire, structural damage, and legal liability. A line had been crossed beyond pettiness or entitlement. It now entered the realm of criminal behavior. The next morning, the homeowner presented the evidence to the authorities. The officers reviewed the footage, the wiring photos, and the energy logs with professional seriousness. Unlike the HOA board, they were not swayed by the neighbor's social standing or charm. The officers agreed that the act constituted illegal tampering with electrical infrastructure, trespassing, and theft of services. They informed the homeowner that they would handle the matter directly. By afternoon, the police arrived at the neighbor's home. The sight of the officers at her door drew residents to windows and porches, their curiosity undeniable. The neighbor stepped outside with a brittle mix of outrage and disbelief, gesturing wildly as she attempted to explain herself. But the evidence was overwhelming, and her confident demeanor cracked under the weight of consequences she had never imagined she would face. The officers did not arrest her, but they issued a formal citation and a cease and desist order with strict enforcement terms. She was warned that any further tampering or trespassing would result in immediate legal action. For someone who had grown accustomed to controlling her surroundings through intimidation and manipulation, the experience was shattering. In the days that followed, the neighborhood grew noticeably quieter. The Tesla remained parked in her driveway, but disconnected, its charging port sealed shut. The neighbor avoided walking near the homeowner's property. Her posture changed from commanding to withdrawn. The HOA, embarrassed by its earlier inaction, scrambled to distance itself from her, issuing new guidelines on property boundaries and electrical access. For the first time in months, the homeowner felt the property return to its rightful state of peace. With the solar grid secured, the cameras idle, and the boundary finally respected, the homeowner reclaimed a sense of ownership and relief that had been overshadowed for too long. The experience left the neighborhood with a story that would be whispered for years, a reminder that sometimes the greatest disruptions come not from disasters or strangers, but from the entitled behavior of those living only a few steps away. And though the conflict had ended, the homeowner knew one truth would linger. When someone believes the rules don't apply to them, consequences must remind them otherwise.